My name is Kay-diene. I am now 33 years old. And before transplant, I was SS.
Okay.
Went into it very much anti-transplant. I currently am the account manager for the state of Florida. And so my role is recruitment, which essentially means I go around the entire state to get individuals between 18 to 40 to join the registry in hopes that they could potentially provide a patient in need with peripheral stem cells or a marrow donation. And then people, hear that, they think, oh, this is scary, and it's not scary at all. But the goal is to get individuals to join the registry in hopes that they can help save a patient's life. This organization is near and dear to my heart because my donor was found through Be the Match. So being able to work for the company that's found my donor feels very full circle. So I'm very honored to be a part of the Be the Match mission and the journey of helping other individuals like myself find their donor matches. For me, and I use this disclaimer every time I speak about this, we are like snowflakes, and you cannot compare one sickle cell patient's journey to another, especially when it comes to transplant. I know my experience with transplant was very different, very unique, and I will never tell someone my expectations and what transplant was, and thinking that it was going to be the same thing for them that it was for me. So I always want to make that clear that this is my journey, and it is very unique to myself. That being said, living with sickle cell, I had a very much helicopter mom, was very much on top of me when it came to, crisis and, making sure I was hydrated. And her thing was always, I don't care if you eat, as long as you drink something, juice, water, whatever, just drink, stay hydrated. And so that, persistence from her kept me, for the most part, 5 crises a year, if that.
Okay.
Throughout childhood. It wasn't until that adolescence into college age where I fell out of care because I went from different states. I moved from New Jersey to Florida, and then back to Jersey, then back to Florida again for college. And so that transition of bouncing back and forth between states, I fell out of care. And with that, but for the most part, I was semi-okay because, I knew how to manage myself.
Okay.
It wasn't until college that things got very different for me. The crises that were once 5 a year started to increase because now I have a relationship that I'm trying to manage. I have a career I'm trying to manage. I have a job, and what my job all entails. I'm trying to keep a social life, all the things that comes along with being an adult. I'm trying to manage, and I was not managing it as successfully as I thought I would. So with that became a lot of crises. And it wasn't until I was maybe say 21, 22 that things started to really go downhill for me. I was in my first medically induced coma, and because I had developed pneumonia in both lungs, my lungs collapsed. And the 5 times a year crises that I was having up until this point, once I, was released from the hospital, woke up from the coma and everything was okay. And I use that in air quotes because I was not okay. I was in the hospital for about 2 months. And once I got discharged and went through PTOT to regain my strength, tried to go back to work, and I was successful up until September of 2012, when one more crisis, and my boss and higher ups at the company told me, listen, we love you, but we can't keep you because you're not here to do a job that we hired you to do. And so I understood completely. So October, my last day there, and I was out of work from October 2012 to the time I moved, say May of 2013, when my mom was like, Kay-diene, I'm in the hospital one more time. She's like, listen, you're going to the hospital by yourself. You're driving yourself to the hospital, which is not safe. Everybody come out to New Jersey. I was like, okay. I was hesitant because at the time I liked Florida. Okay. I liked the warm weather. My body loved the warm weather. Compared to the temperate 4-season like living in New Jersey, the consistent it's either hot or humid or cold for a few days. My body enjoyed that. It did not like the one day it's cold, next day it's hot, next day it's cold. That up and down weather was not an agreeing with my body. But we moved back to New Jersey because that's where help was. That's where my mom was. That's where I had a village to assist with managing my sickle cell. But with it also came depression because I had also started on hydroxyurea and I did not know how that medication was going to affect me. And I know for some people it affects everyone differently, but it wasn't until later that I realized that medication caused a lot of my depression or was a catalyst to it. Because there were times where I would I wake up in the morning, my mom is all going off to work, I'm in the bed. And then when she comes home at 5 o'clock, 5:30, I'm in the bed. And so I knew, not then, but I knew now that was fine before hydroxyurea, not on it, didn't have that issue. But while I was on it, that was one of my main symptoms was depression and thinking that a medication was going to work for me and it did not. But still pushed through. And that's when I connected with the Sickle Cell Association of New Jersey. And that's what introduced me to transplant. So I met the doctor November. We had the consultation with him December. Things were still the same up until that point.
Okay.
And the tipping point was I got a phone call from the hospital saying that we found a match. And I said, okay, thank you.
Really?
Because again, I wanted no parts. No parts. And then like 3 weeks about 3 weeks later, now we're in 2015 and I'm 25, about to turn 26. And my mom was like, oh, have you heard from, the hospital about transplant? I was like, oh yeah, I heard from somebody, but I'm not doing it. So whatever, next conversation. And she was like, hey, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do it because, and I didn't articulate it like this, but I just knew that I just wasn't going to do it. And she was like, hey, what do you have to lose? I was like, what? She's like, what do you have to lose? I said, all right. And so the nurse that I had spoken to said that we could make a consultation with Dr. Riley, my provider at the time, to, meet with him and talk to him and all this stuff. And I'm like, and this was in March now. And so it was about February when she made the call to me and I said, all right, I'm going to do this consultation. And based on what he has to say, we'll make our decision. I still was not sold on the idea, but I said, I'll at least talk to the man. So I came in with, when I say questions, I mean questions. I asked everything you can think of, from will my hair fall out to will my allergies be the same to just everything you could think of. Mm-hmm. And when I met him, again, another short white guy, and I was just like, okay. But he made me feel so comfortable. And we talked for hours. And literally, he did not tell me, okay, I have to rush to a meeting or I have another patient or nothing. It was as if we were two old colleagues just chopping it up and talking. And one thing that I appreciated about him was if there was a question that he did not know the answer to, he did not fake the answer or make up an answer. He would say, I don't know, but I will get an answer for you. And I was like, and he genuinely got back to me with an answer. And this, I mean, I knew that later that he, got back to me with answers, but at the same time, the fact that it's a doctor who most doctors have this, I am doctor, do what I say,
Yeah.
kind of mentality. My word is law. Is, and for him to say, I don't know, it was very comforting. And I know it might sound weird, but he's human and he understands that he is, and he's not God, and he doesn't pretend to be, and he's not going to know it all. And I appreciated the humanness in him, and he provided me with that. And, we joked and laughed, and he made me feel comfortable and confident. So, he showed me my HLA typing results, and he said, your donor is a male, so you will have some male DNA. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And he said, if your donor's blood type is different than your blood type is, if you ever commit a crime, leave the blood, not the hair. Like, I like you. Like, because it was just a genuine conversation.
Yeah.
And we laughed and we joked, and I was like, okay, if this is who's going to do my transplant, then I'm sold. So my mom looked at me, I looked at the doctor, and I said, she's like, what do you want to do? I said, all right, let's do it. And in my mind, I said, if this did not work, I don't want to hear about it ever again, because I at least tried.
Yeah.
And I knew, because one of the questions I did ask was, if this didn't work, would my sickle cell be worse? And he said, yes, there's a possibility it will be worse. I said, okay. But he did say that you are sick enough, but also well enough, which sounds odd, but it made sense to me.
Yeah.
That I could pursue transplant. I said, all right, we can do this. And when we met initially, I know I'm jumping all over the place, but I'm trying to recall our first meeting. He said, I have good news and I have bad news. I'm like, okay, what's the bad news? But at this point, why is there bad news at all?
Yeah.
He was like, we can't publish you. If we do the donor with him as my donor, we can't publish your results. And I'm like, okay, well, that's it? You publish my results? That's all that you care about? But for scientific purposes, any medical journal, based on the study that they were following with me,
Okay.
the donor had to be a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10 HLA typing match.
Right.
And my donor was an 8 out of 10. So I just made the cut to be published. So my mom looked over to me and said, Kenny, don't worry. You do your own publication. I'm like, all right, so if that's the bad news, then what's the good news? And then, of course, the good news was they found the donor. But leaving the meeting, he said, we're going to still continue to look for a better person.
Okay.
Just because they wanted the best results. And up until this was March, July is when they stopped searching and said, okay, we're going to reach out to the donor and see if he still wants to donate, because they don't know when he joined the registry. So they want to make sure that he still wants to pursue it and, continue to be my donor. And so on my end, it was still, waiting and just mentally saying, okay, I'm going to do transplant. Let's prepare myself. Let's talk to my previous hematologist. Let's, do all the preliminary testing that you have to do, which involves like MRIs and blood tests and, pulmonary testing and all the things to make sure that your body is in the best health. And I know I say this loosely, the best health possible prior to transplant, so that they have a baseline of what they need to work with. So they did talk to me about it.
Okay.
And, the nurse told me to look into it. And when I looked at, I did call someone and said, hey, how much is this going to cost me? And I remember the woman on the phone saying, she asked me, is this for, you know, a medical reason, or if you're doing this just because you want to preserve your fertility? And I said, this is for medical reasons. And she said, okay, the cost is going to be about $15,000.
Yeah.
So what? I said, oh, okay. She said, do you want to make an appointment? I said, ma'am, I'm sorry, but I don't think that you just put down on preserving my eggs. And so I had that moment of, at the time, you know, thinking about wanting a family and that possibility of it not being happening any longer, because transplant may take away my fertility. You know, that was part of the question, many of the questions I asked my doctor during our 2-hour consultation was, will I have the ability to have children? And he could not give me a definitive answer, which again, I respected.
Okay.
So I went through that emotional moment of, oh my gosh, I might have to adopt. I might not have children naturally. What will that look like? And so those emotions and that roller coaster ride of acceptance, and finally the 5 stages of grief, I went through that in a very short period of time, but I went through it and I said, okay, you know what? If it's meant for me to have kids, I will have them. But I did have the conversation of preservation and the astronomical cost of what it would take to preserve my eggs was not in the cards for me to do. Okay. I said I was going to chance it, and that's what we did. I'm comfortable with my decision. I don't regret it. I know now, especially me at 33 with no prospects and never having had children, you know, I am in the process of talking to a gynecologist and going through the steps of what does my fertility look like. Because I have been told, and this was some years ago, you know, maybe about 2 or 3 years post-transplant, I had my doctor run hormone testing, and they said, you're on the higher end of normal. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? Now, he's not a gynecologist, so he can't tell me what it means.
Yeah.
But again, this was some months ago, and having been on synthetic birth control for a long period of time, and again, like I said, being 33, no prospects, and the potential of wanting at least one, and I say only one, my mom don't ask for any more than one. You know, I'm like, okay, what does this look like? So making appointments and talking to a gynecologist that I trust and saying, okay, can you help me at least establish a baseline so I know where to go from here? I did allogenical, so I had an unrelated donor. It would not have been haploid because my sister was only a half match. And because they found a better match, the 8 versus the 6, they went with the 8. So it was allogenic transplant. And prior to transplant, this is where my disclaimer comes into play. I did not know how sick I was going into it. I did not know my brain was suffering silent strokes. So when they did the MRI, as per protocol, they saw the evidence of the strokes going on in multiple parts of my brain. And so I'm functioning, I'm driving, I'm working on my master's degree. So I know nothing about what's going on with my brain. And going into it, I was excited. I was very much, we did the CAMPATH regimen, which was a 4-day injection. And I had a reaction every day of the 4 days. And it was just shivering, you know, having to take Demerol and Benadryl just to at least calm down the shivering. But once again, we got through that. That was a rough 4 days, but we got through it. And then went home again, going into my official admission for transplant. They
Okay.
gave me the 2 chemo medications, one of them being fludarabine. Can never remember the second one.
Busulfan.
It was no, not busulfan, because I took busulfan and I had the conversation with my doctor. It was not busulfan because it wasn't as strong as a regimen. They wanted to,
Okay.
yeah. So that was, I, again, cannot remember the drug. But fludarabine was definitely one of them. Took the medication and took the anti-rejection meds, and Prograf and cyclosporin, not cyclosporin, I'm sorry, Cipro were the culprits.
Okay.
So when I received my marrow, September 11th, I told the nurses to run it slow, because me knowing blood and transfusions, even with the port, it hurts.
Yeah.
If it's run fast. So I said, can you just run it a little slow for me? And literally in the afternoon of the 11th, they started the marrow to with my blood, all this beautiful marrow. And I'm like, all right, I feel good. My hair was starting to fall out, but not, crazy. And later on that day, it was my fault. I fell asleep. And I'm like, okay, I wake up with the most excruciating headache. And I'm like, what in the hell? Like, I've never had a headache that bad. And I remember my mom, like literally it woke me up out of my sleep. My mom was like, Kay-diene, what's wrong? And I said, I have a headache. And so the nurses came in, they tried to give me Tylenol. And I try to go to a place, just whatever place. A lot of the sickle cell patients, we know what it is, but we just try to escape the pain for a brief moment. And I opened my eyes once more and I said, Ma, I cannot see you. She rushed back to the nurse's station, and that was the last thing I remember.
Okay.
I woke up, I see my favorite person, my Leo, my uncle,
Okay.
in the chair. I see what looks like foam padding on the rails. And I'm like, okay. And I'm like, okay, I have to use the restroom. Like, Kay-diene, you can use the bathroom. I said, no, I have to get to the bathroom. So I'm trying to get up to go to the bathroom. Like, no, Kay-diene, you can stay in the bed. You can do not get up.
Yeah.
I'm like, why the hell am I not allowed to get up to go to the bathroom? My mom like literally showed me the catheter bag. And I was like, okay, what happened? Because why do I have a catheter? So like, you had a seizure. So what? I was like, okay. I was not scared. And I know that sounds crazy, but again, with all the conversations that me and my doctor had, one of the things we talked about was complications, and one of them was seizures. So I was comforted because we had a 2-hour consultation. And so I was okay.
Mm.
So had the seizure, all was, I thought, well with the world. Of course, they kept me on a phenobarbital drip to make sure the seizures would subside. So I was in and out of sleepiness, but I was decent. I was fine. And I was up and walking. And, once they took the catheter out a couple of days later, and all of the, countdown starts. Your day 0 when you get your marrow, and then you count there from your day 1, day 2. So because of the seizure, they kept me in the hospital for a little longer and of course they had to wait until my white count was a certain number. So I said, all right. So I left the hospital about September 27th.
Okay.
And during the time I did give the nurses hell, only because I snuck pizza into the hospital.
Okay. And you were
I
in
thought
a
I'm not allowed to have takeout. But I did sneak pizza into the hospital. I thought I got away with it until one of the nurses ratted me up. But hey, I was good.
Yeah.
So we get discharged, and now we're like, all right, we're prepping that. Now we go to the hospital or the clinic every few days or every few weeks. I'm mentally preparing. I'm doing things next. My hair is almost all of it's off, off my head.
Okay, so
I'm
did you wait for
sorry.
it to fall or did you just?
It just started naturally falling out. I
Okay.
didn't, it got to a point where I had like a small patch up top.
Okay.
Um, and I was like, all right, I'll just get, somebody to shave it off for me, no
Yeah.
problem. What I did not prepare for was one night, and I remember just having to go to the bathroom. I'm like, okay. And all of a sudden, I stumble back onto the bed, and I'm like, what the hell? And I feel up and down my leg, and I'm like, wait a minute, my leg is numb. I can't feel it. I'm touching it, but I can't feel the sensation. So I hollered for my mother, and she was like, what happened? I'm like, my leg's numb. I couldn't bend it. I couldn't wiggle my toes, none of that. So we rushed to Hackensack, and everything is semi-normal. The only thing wrong was my leg was numb. So I'm in the ER, I'm eating, I'm talking to the doctors, and like, all right, we're gonna order an MRI and go through the process. The
Yeah.
mom said, all right, it's the middle of the night. I'm gonna go home, try to get some sleep, and come back and bring you food, bring you clothes. So I was like, okay, no issue. The last thing I remember was being in what I remember now as the MRI machine, and the
Okay.
tech saying, we're gonna try to do it again, but can you please try to stay as still as possible? I said, all right. So I put my arms by my side and I, held on tight, and I closed my eyes, and that was it. And when I wake up, I look around. I'm like, okay. I remember the last thing was the ER, and I'm expecting to be in the ER.
Sure.
When I look, I'm like, okay, the news is on. I'm in an unknown room. All these poles and machines. I'm like, okay, what the hell? Where am I? Nothing looks familiar. So I'm like, this is weird. It did not, and I heard the news talking about Halloween costumes, what people are going to wear for Halloween. And I saw in the news Michelle Obama congratulating Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
They said she won. They never said what she won. They just said she won. I said, okay. Again, it still didn't dawn on me what day of the week it was or what month it was. So first person I remember seeing my mom, she, we prayed, and she was like, what Psalm do you want to read? I said, Psalm 91. And she's like, okay, it's my favorite song.
Yeah, me too.
So we read Psalm 91, and I was like, Mom, what date is it? She said, it's October. What? And I remember the exact date she told me, but I was like, it's October. When I went in the hospital, in the ER, it was still September.
Yeah.
I was in a coma for 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Because I could not stop seizing. The leg numbness was that part of my brain shutting down movements. So the anti-rejection mitigation program and Cipro caused the seizures. And I could not stop seizing. And my neurologist told my mom, and for Dave, and this is me telling the story from everybody else's testament to me, they couldn't touch me because I unknowingly signed a DNR. I did not interpret it as a DNR.
Someone just asked you to sign something?
So they asked you to sign an advance directive. And there's a part in the advance directive that asks you, do you want, extreme measures?
Mm-hmm.
And I wrote, if I'm a vegetable, let me go.
Oh, okay. Okay.
But if there is hope for me to, pump at all your might, because I'm trying to be saved here.
Mm-hmm.
But if there's no life, my brain function is non-existent, let me go in peace. Let me go meet my maker in peace. But the way that the nurses interpreted it was, I wanted no intervention. So this was over the weekend, mind you. So this is Friday night, Saturday, Sunday. No nurse. All they did was make me comfortable. It was until Monday that the doctor came in and told my mom what his plan was. And he was like, I want to save her. She's the same age as my son. I think I can help her. I want to put her in another coma.
Oh my God.
My mom at first was like, no, because I had already been in one. It made, she didn't want me to go through another one. And the doctor said, no, please, let me try. Ignore the director. Thank God, because I would be if he didn't. Ignore the vet directive and put me in a coma. So 2.5 weeks, I was dead to the world. And it's now October and close to Halloween. Like I said, they're talking about costumes and the World Series. And I think the Mets were playing in the World Series and all the things. And I was just like, oh, okay. So again, everything, waking up and doctors are coming in to evaluate me. They're asking me questions. And I remember one doctor asked me, who's the president? And again, they said Hillary won. So like the doctor said, he asked, who's the president? I said, oh, Hillary. He was like, no, Obama's still president. I was like, okay, whatever. I know what I saw in the news. I know what you saw. I know what I saw. So my mom was like, Katie, who is the president? I said, Hillary. And for the longest, she could not understand why I kept saying Hillary was the president. And so I told her about the news story, and she's like, oh, you watched the her winning the Democratic nomination. Okay, it makes sense now, because you thought I was crazy. I'm like, no, I saw the news. I know what I saw. So we cleared that up. They realized that I ain't that crazy. I know current events.
Yeah.
Somewhat. So now we're in November, still, back and forth in the hospital for the most part. They switched my my program to cyclosporin.
Okay.
And cyclosporin caused brain swelling. So a whole another slew of issues because that caused confusion. So one day again, getting ready to go to the clinic, and I'm trying to go to the bathroom. And I think why am I always going to the bathroom? Like I'm trying to go to the bathroom, my mom sees me. Again, this is from her testimony, not mine. She sees me trying to take off my clothes in the hallway. She's like, Kenny, what are you doing? I said, I'm using the bathroom. And she's fighting. I'm like, I'm trying to use the bathroom. Kenny, not in the bathroom. So she brings me into the bathroom finally.
Yeah.
Very strong-willed. And she's like, what is going on? She could not figure out what was wrong. So she, called upstairs neighbor and, tried to get me dressed and ready to go. And I'm in and out of it. And I know my upstairs neighbor. So she's like, Kenny, you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm okay. But again, I'm in and out of confusion. So we finally get to the clinic. And this part, I have no recollection of. But my nurse was like, Katie, where are you? I said, I'm at home. Katie, where are you? I said, I'm at home. It's like, Katie, this is Melissa. Where are you? I said, so Melissa finally explained, Katie, you're at the hospital, you're at the clinic. This is Melissa, your nurse, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, whatever. About 2 minutes later, Katie, where are you? And I'm like, I'm at home. How many times I gotta tell you that? I'm at home. She's like, okay, cool. So ambulance straight to the hospital, didn't bypass all, do not pass go, not collect $200. We went straight to the hospital. And they saw the MRI, they're like, okay, you have press. And it was caused, which is basically a long acronym for posterior reversible encephalopathy syndrome, which is, like I said, just brain swelling from the cyclosporin.
Yeah.
So my blood pressure was through the roof, and that's one of the main symptoms. So trying to figure out how to get me back to normalcy is what they attempted. So they figured out that it was a cyclosporin, got my blood pressure back to normal, and if it wasn't one thing, was another thing. And from there, it was a consistent infection. And literally, I felt like once they got the infection cleared up, I was back in the hospital. And I literally felt like I lived there. Like 8PE has seen every corner of me at that hospital. I've seen every corner of that floor. I know every tech, every nurse, because that was my home away from home.
Yeah.
We finally got, everything back on track. For the most part, I was able to spend Christmas at home for once. Because literally I spent every holiday in the hospital. Holiday, I say holiday, I mean Labor Day, Thanksgiving.
July 4th.
I was very upset about that.
Yeah.
Because my lady I call love of my life, I lived with her when I was in Miami.
Okay.
She came up for Thanksgiving, and I was going to cook with her. We had a big plan, and I was in the hospital for Thanksgiving. I was livid. But Thanksgiving, New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, all in the hospital except Christmas. But the shining lights to all of that was right before Christmas. They did a chimerism test, and they also did the test to see how much sickle cells are still in your system.
Yeah.
And the test said no sickle cells.
Wow.
So that was my Christmas present.
Okay.
No sickle cells in my system. 28 days while in my medically induced coma. I was 100% engrafted. So that was October 9th. That was a silver lining. Yeah. A rough silver lining, but a silver lining nonetheless. What I did not prepare for going through transplant was they tell you 6 months to a year to recover. And when 6 months came and left, I was like, wait a minute, I'm not better. I'm not working. I'm not driving. I'm not doing all the things that I envisioned I would be doing. So there came that depression of feeling robbed of this is not what I was promised. I was promised a cure. I was promised better. I was promised a life. Yeah. And I feel like I'm worse now than I was when I had sickle cell. So it was fighting and being pissed off at everybody. The only person that did not feel my wrath was my doctor because he was too nice. He was a sweetheart, but he didn't get it. But everybody else did. And my mom got into therapy. And I think that really, I was able to tell the therapist and my mother and everybody, like, listen, I blame all of you because if it wasn't for you all, I would not be here. Yeah. And worse now than I was when I had sickle cell.
Yeah.
So getting all those emotions and feelings and just anger out was very helpful. And she was a godsend at times.